Yeah. We'll need a person for each of them though, and that's also a part of the limiting factor.
I solemnly swear, if it comes down to dealing with mutalisks on planet Earth, I am willing to take that role as the man who's built the most turrets. I will be the man in the missile turret. All right.
Aren't we all though, Nate?
You take that to the bank, Space Force.
All right, so Astrea with a relatively early scout, but not early enough to get the deny on the hatchery of Namshar. And so things will transpire as usual, as normal. There is a Twilight Council in the back, however, of the base of Astrea. So I imagine after this Adept, we're likely to see a Stalker to deny the next bit of information. And Nate, I would be thrilled to see the Adept build that Astrea actually was trying to implement when he was doing the Zest 420 challenge that I proposed earlier from Pili Pili. So here's the Stalker.
What is the Zest 420 challenge?
It's the Adept build of Zest, where he gets 8 Adepts attacking by 420. So Pili Pili issued the challenge of whoever can do this will get a replay analysis from me. And I joined the lobby, and Astrea was like, hey, let's try it at the same time. So we tried it at the same time. My first attempt was actually a little bit better than Astrea's because I was copying what Pili Pili was saying, and Astrea was taking a completely different approach. And then on the second try, he actually got it at something like 415 to 417, so like seconds earlier, and he had an extra adept. He is just, he figured it out and did the Zest build better than Zest, basically. So
that is incredible.
Yeah,
that is exactly the kind of content that I like to see. It's fun, it's funny, and it is actually serving a purpose. Whether or not you reach that goal, at the very least, you discover whether or not you can improve what is already there. Right? Isn't that the point of science?
That is exactly it, Nate, I think. And we're seeing exactly what we're talking about, actually, right? Like the normal adept attack comes with 4 gateways. This one has 5, and I think he's gonna have 9 adepts instead of 8. And this is all with his own magnificent brain, as he managed to, take that gas a little bit earlier. I think he goes gas before gate or something like that, if I'm not mistaken. And so this is his spin, and I saw him figure it out live, so I am super excited. It's the 9 Adept Astrea build, and it is popping right before our eyes.
Yeah, it's a lot of adepts, and there are there's no roaches, there's no banelings, no potential to get either of those things for a rather large amount of time. And I wonder if Astrea wants to keep everything here for these drones and maybe try to transition with the shade to somewhere he can get a little bit more damage done. That prism has made its way over to the third base. So excuse me, to the main. I don't mind him staying in that third so that the units have to spread themselves out even more. And he's completely caught off guard by this. The adepts are shooting the queen, but if they start shooting at the drones, we're going to see a lot die real fast.
Oh, and they're all gonna pull together at the natural, and the Lynx get a decent surround as the roaches pop out, but has enough damage already been dealt by Astrea. Astrea seems to think so, Nate, as he is actively retreating instead of looking for additional drone damage. Actually, there's adepts still in the main that are gonna pick up a queen too. This is brilliant play by the All-American Protoss.
Yeah, I was going to say, even we can't keep up with how fast he's slipping and sliding between these Zerg expansions. And I think you said it beautifully, though, Cass. Has he already done the damage that he needs to do? He's gone back to building probes back home. He's up 13 workers against a Zerg, which is something that should never happen. GG's called. Astrea just comes in with the hammer throw and takes game. He's going to slow things down now. Speaking of the man in question in the southeast, he's the blue Protoss player. He is Astrea.
What an angel. And in the top left-hand side, playing for Storm Gaming and trailing 1 game at the moment, it is the Swedish Red Zerg Terror, Namshar. So
Cats, have you ever seen this before? Have you ever seen a hatchery in somebody else's base?
Once or twice in my day, I've seen a few, my fair share of hatcheries.
Maybe a few times.
Yeah, maybe a few times. I mean, we'll see what Namshar is able to do from this. He is taking a gas, which is an indicator for potential aggression here. Of course, there is the probe from Astrea that is providing a little bit of shelter for Astrea to know if there is an extra base being set up or if he should be committing completely to the defense. As he scouts the hatchery, he's going to feel a little bit better about himself. And no less. I mean, 2 zealots. This will be pretty good defense, but he really needs to get rid of that hatchery. before the Zerglings start applying pressure elsewhere. So I wouldn't mind some more probes being pulled here, Nate.
Yeah, that's going to be a big delay on this. And now the Lings coming forward. Of course, you got to make sure that the Zealot doesn't get pulled out. But at the same time, you don't want the Lings to destroy your infrastructure because of their damage. He cancels the hatch at the last second.
Yeah, I'm not sure I like that, because now these Lings are just completely useless. So all he's done is buy himself time, whereas with the hatchery finished, he could have... Oh, nice timing. What a bait. Oh, godlike awareness there by Astrea, knowing exactly when the Adept could pop out and that there was no room for those Zerglings to get in. Regardless, Nate, like I was saying, with that hatchery finishing, at least Namshar could have tried to break through on 2 different fronts and try to get us around with this onto that Zealot with extra links or something like that. But just canceling it, I'm not sure if I would feel comfortable with that, because his own natural was also very, very, very delayed.
Yeah, I was going to say, I feel like a lot of Zergs let it finish because even if you don't get to build anything with the larva from it, like whether or not you want to, don't a lot of Zergs still use the broodlings that come out to get the surround on either the walling unit or like a pylon or something, like if it's close enough?
Yeah, of course, if you have the option to do that with the surrounding links, like you're saying, yeah, absolutely. But in this case, the links of Namshar were outside, so I don't think Astrea was gonna kill that hatchery anytime soon, right? Like with just the one Zealot attacking it. So I think he definitely could have gotten some units out of it. And now it's Astrea with a relatively sizable army for this stage in the game. It just looks like 5 units, but it's a lot of units, and Namshar has been cutting a lot of corners. So let's see what happens here. He currently does not have the firepower to deal with this, quite frankly.
No, and even just a queen being isolated and killed here would be pretty bad. Using the Zerglings to try to dance around it. This is definitely Namshar trying to make the most of an uncomfortable situation. And hey, if he never does get to kill that queen, I'm going to consider this a little bit of a mistake on his part. Oh, gets surrounded. No.
Yeah, I mean, he really wanted to kind of get rid of the links, which there's a case to be made for that. The links are going to be most of the damage output, and even a queen with low HP will soak up a lot more damage than it's dealing. But he really should have turned to that queen and finished it off a little bit earlier. A little bit lucky, I want to say, of a surround by Namshar. Of course, it's luck mixed with expertise to give himself the best chance. Yeah, not a great attack from Astrea, all in all.
Yeah, well, I mean, at the end of the day, though, the worker count still makes me feel like, despite everything, this is a good position for Astrea. He's up 37 probes to 24 drones. Now, a wave of drones is coming out, but that's actually not going to put him over. So I don't mind it, especially with the timing of the third Nexus. Like, everything feels like it still should be a slight advantage economy-wise for Astrea. And if this third goes up without a hitch, there's no lair yet either for Namshar, right? There's no tech at all. It's just a spawning pool. Nothing else.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, and I mean, Astrea moved out also unpunished with all of his units. Ooh, Oracle will go down. So that's a small win for Namshar. That's good. I mean, it's a big win, but he needs more of that, right now.
Yeah, that was definitely a good catch to be able to get. Since he has the Roach Warren underway, he's just now started the lair. So he's going to be moving, going to sashay into that mid game.
Ooh. Yes, indeed. And I really like Astrea's position, like you were pointing out, but I really don't like the decision from Namshar to not make use out of that hatchery at all, given the circumstances, right? It seems to have just set him behind by default. And again, all of the units of Astrea were able to cross because there was no contingency of Zerglings for Namshar to kind of run by when the units of Astrea left, right? Like there was no threat perceived from Astrea, and that is what allows him to put so much pressure onto the side of Namshar early on. And he definitely had to make a lot of links to answer it. So yeah, he's gonna fall behind in workers even at this point, 6.5 minutes in. He's behind in economy.
Yeah, and you know, the fact that Astrea is willing to just send Void Rays out like this to try and poke or do harass or whatever kind of says everything, because you can't really just do this type of thing in a normal game. Usually there's a lot more queens, or there's something else that's going to be coming out that you're like, I don't know if I want my Void Rays to be across the map. I might need them at home, but he doesn't have to worry about any of that because the defense is solid. The setup at the third base looks pretty tight. He's actually kind of like semi-walling off the area by the gas guys that are over there. And he's a 3-base Protoss versus a 3-base Zerg. There's no pressure in the world on him. Zerg is always going to be pushed to have more bases than the other players. That is how Zerg works. You want to have the whole map covered in creep. You want to take bases because it's usually the way that the creep is designed. You can defend it a little bit better, but Astrea just feels like he has so much freedom. It speaks volumes about his confidence in this specific game.
Yeah, and this is a style that we never really see much used. I personally really like making more than just one Void Ray because it forces out either a lot of queens or eventually, almost unequivocally, Hydras. There are always Hydras made to respawn and to try and move out on the map if you're the Zerg player. And then there's Zerg. And I think that that's where most players have been falling short. I love everything that Astrea is doing right now, Nate. He's not overcommitting to the Void Race, but he's committed enough to the Void Race that he's forcing out those Hydras, that he's forcing out those Queens at the very least. And behind this, he has gone for Charge Lots. Charge Lots hard counter Hydras in small numbers. And then, as they scale up, he's already getting the Storm. So Mana did something similar to this, but he went faster for the Storm where there might have been an opening. Astrea is very layered in his approach, where he has many different 1-2 punches, all of which make perfect sense from my perspective.
Yeah, the pressure, keeping it up. One of the things we need to keep in mind, of course, Astrea does not want to overextend before Storm finishes, especially. If the Hydralisks are actually able to shoot at these units for even a few moments, they will rip them to pieces. Void Rays can be a bit flimsy. The Archons don't really have the range. And we don't have a tremendous number of charge lots that are out here to soak up damage. In fact, a good amount of them are in that prism. But I don't think it's a huge deal because Astrea is going to do what I've actually been really wanting someone to do on this map, which is take this as the fourth base. It's very tucked in. It's very far back. Even though the direct path from that fourth base of Namshar is not too far, it's still very choky. And it actually allows, if Astrea eventually ends up mining and going to the gold gas space, he can use that high ground to pretty easily protect that fourth base. It's going to be tucked in behind everything else that he builds if he moves forward on the west and central side of the map.
Yeah, and that choke usage is going to be very consistent with his approach, right? As he's getting that Storm and that AoE that is ever so important. And yeah, he didn't have very many Zealots, Nate. I like that you point that out, because instead what he had is 10 gateways set up. So if there was an attack coming his way, mostly Hydras, he can warp in 10 Zealots, right? There's not an attack coming out his way. He knows it because he moved out. Then instead he drops a fourth, right? I really love the way that Astrea does things here. And that is why he's such a strong player, I think, is just he's thinking things through. Again, such a strong layered approach with this Storm now kicking in. It's going to be very difficult for Namshar to stop this attack. He is doing the what he can on his end of things. I think Lurkers is where he will feel safe, but I don't know if Astrea will give him the time. Here we'll see.
Yeah, those Templar do have Storm. He's got quite a bit of firepower here. The only thing that I would like to see with this, well, I guess he's got the Prism in the northeast, but maybe a Roddy Prism here would help just to reinforce on that position. But I guess
it's also
prism? Not bad either. Yeah, just the second prism, just
nice.
Get the backup so you can do the harass while you reinforce the front army. You don't have to necessarily choose. However, big choice need to be made. Namshar's got to deal with these Zealots. He does run away at the sight of the Lurkers though, so solid D so far.
Yeah, but at the same time, Astrea is aware of where the Lurkers have been relocated to, and he is going to be able to push a little bit, but not enough. And actually, his Warp Prism will get picked off. Those Zealots will not get to warp in, and now Astrea has to go through a choke if he wants to attack into Namshar. Not advisable.
Yeah, the other thing we need to keep in mind as well is a general weakness of Protoss versus Zerg. In this situation, if you don't have Oracles, the Lurkers are going to always be pretty far back. That Overseer is in that siege mode, right? So he can see very far and reveal very far. If the Zerg player feels they can't necessarily take the whole army on, if you're able to snipe the Observer, then they can't really do a whole lot about the Lurkers. Now, he actually does get a few Lurker kills coming up this ramp because that Observer is safe and alive. Quite a few Lurkers get killed. Now the Hydralisks need to go up a ramp against High Templar. Thankfully for him, there's not an infinite amount of Storms left with this army. He did burn through the majority of his energy. I think there's just 2 Storms available total here, so he might want to retreat, regroup, pick up some more pieces. I'm not 100% sure. He's got this big wave of Zealots just waiting on the right side, by the way. These Hydralisks walk into it.
Yeah, there is a ton of Hydralisks with the Storm, though. Astrea is going to be able to take some good engagements. Yeah, I'm a little bit surprised that he didn't actually keep that high ground and try to section off the Hydras with Storm to maybe apply more pressure or kill drones at that base, perhaps. But the one dangerous thing for Astrea's unit composition is that it has very little and very low range, rather. So the Zealots don't want to be running into those lurkers. He did take a good engagement because the lurkers were exposed without any meat defending them. The Hydras were out of position. But Astrea is playing a careful game, a patient game. Let's see what he's able to do here.
This might be a moment of truth, though. Namshar wants to force the issue while we have 4 carriers in production. There's the revelation to try and get the vision and the detection on the lurkers. But you're talking about that range on this army. Without the Templar right here, these Hydras are getting quite a bit of damage done. He needs the Storms to hold the Hydras back.
Yes, indeed. And this was a wonderful decision by Namshar to go for the lurkers and to rush the lurkers. Because I think that, say, Astrea had gone instead for something like Colossus or preferably even perhaps Disruptors, I think that this would be a much more powerful setup for him. But hey, he's brought an Observer here. It's a very difficult thing to do. And now he's gonna break through the defenses of the 3 lurkers of Namshar to take home some wins.
Yeah, he puts the Observer into that siege mode pretty far away from the vision of Namshar so that he could only see just those lurkers, kill them with the Zealots, and then he was going to open up and more attack paths for himself throughout the game. Wow. Queen gets killed. Drones tried to hold position around it. They were unable to do so in time. Lurkers will clean those up at 22 drones massacred. And you know what, Cats? This was exactly what Astrea wanted because now he's got time. He's building 5 carriers at once, and he has Storm to back him up.
Yeah, exactly. With those counterattacks, he buys himself so much space as Namshar is forced to pull back and not pay attention to his army at the front. He still has a strong position, but once the rest of these carriers join the army, it's gonna be very difficult to imagine that Namshar will ever have enough, and Astrea with the presence of mind to continue these counterattacks across the map.
Yeah, next wave of carriers is arriving to join this army. Careful with the High Templar, though. Need to make sure you're not chucking those away. Big revelation is going to reveal, I believe that is all but 1 or 2 maybe of the lurkers. So if Astrea can clean the rest of this army out, I don't really see too much of a path to victory here for Namshar. Remaxing on Hydras when he loses all of the other units that can support them is going to be really difficult, because another thing that I thought was quite nice is we do actually still have the +1 was already done for the air weapons before the carriers even came out. I would like to see if he could have gotten more of those upgrades, but I think that was actually killed by the first Hydra poke.
Yeah, I mean, I would feel okay about Namshar's chances if he had taken no damage, but he's lost 19 workers and a hatchery behind this, whilst attacking and committing heavily to a very expensive army that has now evaporated. So what can Namshar do from here? He can try and get Vipers, snack on these carriers one by one. Yeah, but I mean, it's a tall order. It's a long road ahead. He's gonna need to snag a lot of carriers here, Nate.
I think if you're Astrea, the biggest thing you want to avoid is being able to get snagged, right? Force the fight, force the big fight. If you can take it, you want to have it in one big swoop. You don't want to give the Zerg player time to chip away at this army, especially because the lurker count isn't really going to be there anymore as much, because you want to have the Hydralisks to deal with these carriers. So Astrea's kind of posturing around. This is a very awkward way to move an army, but hey, whatever works. Get some feedbacks. One carrier gets yoinked.
Yeah, but the feedbacks are fantastic all in all, because that's the only tool that's reliable for Namshar. Now, Astrea just has to take an engagement and be sure that he wants to take an engagement, and I think he can plow through this army of Hydralisks and Lurkers, even focus firing the Lurkers to make sure that the Archons are going to be able to contribute. And now he's just pushing on forth. I don't think there's any stopping this man. 30 drones have fallen during this. Even if this army was to get cleaned up, I think it's all over. And Astrea is going to take a very swift 2-0 here, Nate.
Yeah, for a swarm of 50 Protoss locusts in the air, rip everything to pieces. And Astrea